and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I think I'm going to start off this broadcast with a topic that I tend to cover quite a bit. I'm pretty big homeschool advocate. I really see a flaw in the public school systems, which I think most people do. And definitely with this Common Core and just the continual socializing of the education system on the public level. Private schools have been getting to the point where there's a lot of people that see a lot of the private schools not representing ideology that they agree with. It's getting to the point that most people are looking at homeschooling, and I think that's a great thing. I have an article to start off with here from Natural News. This was posted 2 days ago. The collapse of American education continues as rich families pull their kids out of private schools. Many Americans are aware that the nation's public education system is bloated, expensive, and incompetent, turning out millions of high school graduates who can't read, write, or speak well, cannot accurately recite U.S. history, and know very little about civics and government. As a result, more and more Americans are pulling their children out of public schools and either placing them in private, secular, or religious schools, or homeschooling them. That hasn't traditionally been the case for wealthier Americans. However, for years, most of them have avoided sending their children to public schools, opting instead to send them to pricey, exclusive private schools where they presumably receive better educations than their public school counterparts. All that seems to be changing now, as reported by CNBC. The wealthy are increasingly pulling their kids out of private schools and opting instead to hire private tutors for in-home instruction. As a financial news network reported, part of the reason appears to be that competition at the elite schools is becoming more fierce, so much that even exclusive private educations won't adequately prepare the children of the elite. As most children return to school, many affluent families are choosing to pull. I already went over that. The need for full-time tutoring. Around 50% of the inquiries we're getting at the moment are for long-term daily home tutoring. Steve Spriggs, managing director of London-based private tutoring service William Clarence Education, told CNBC. He added that the trend is growing from merely seeking out private tutors to replicating the classroom environment in their own homes, a home classroom in the same vein as a home office. Spriggs noted that a number of families were asking for full-time home tutors because they either traveled so frequently that sending their kids to one school was not practical, or because they simply did not want their children attending boarding schools. The trend is also rising in Europe and Britain in particular. We've had one family from the Middle East request a residential teacher to teach their children within their penthouse in Knightsbridge because even getting to a school with drivers and guards is so much of a hassle, Spriggs said. Home tutoring is not new, of course, and a lot of tuition firms also offer extra tutoring services to families that want their kids to have extra instruction before taking entrance exams at competitive private schools, such as Harrow, St. Paul's, or Eton in the UK. Vaccine violence, cross-dressing events, and other reasons parents are pulling their kids from public schools. However, Spriggs said his company was getting fewer requests for extra hours of tutoring off and on, and was instead receiving more requests of full-time tutors that essentially became members of the family's household staff. We always make it clear to parents that we will only offer full-time schooling for a year, though, he told CNBC. Any more than a year and children start to lose out on what school environment can give them, such as social skills and the vital interaction they need. Although we try to mitigate that anyway in our home tutoring with sports clubs and museum trips as part of the teaching program, he said. Back in the U.S., parents are pulling their children from public schools for a variety of reasons, many having to do with authoritarian government policies and far left-wing social engineering. In California, for example, as reported by Natural News editor Mike Adams, the health ranger, the passage of mandatory vaccination legislation earlier this year, which robs parents of the right to refuse vaccinating their children based on philosophical or religious objections, has led many to decide to homeschool their kids instead. It looks like the nation's private schools are following in the footsteps of its public schools. And, you know, a lot of these reasons are a perfect reason to homeschool. And I think that the more people are homeschooling, the more people are doing the in-home type teaching, you can still get plenty of interaction with kids because, well, if all the kids in the neighborhood are at home, get with the parents in the neighborhood and decide, hey, this is when we'll have this kind of a recess playtime. For history, we'll take a field trip here. You can still get that interaction, and it's not a controlled interaction, so you have a freer expression. And I think that's even something that most people fail to realize, that the children don't get that chance in the public school or even the private school system. So I think that homeschooling is going to become a stronger force, and it's really important, no matter, you know, our belief, our religion, whatever, homeschoolers are going to have to stick together to fight against government intrusion, because all across the globe, you see this happening where homeschoolers are getting attacked by government, and I think it's Germany that's banned homeschooling. So, you know, there's problems with a lot of this. I have a Ron Paul Liberty Report, The Future of Homeschooling, and I want to go ahead and get into this. And it also has Tom Woods from Mises Institute. So let's go ahead and get into this.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. We have a special guest, a friend of the freedom movement, and he's a prolific writer. He's written many, many books. He's also a senior fellow at the Mises Institute, and he just happens to be a course director and writer for the Ron Paul curriculum. Oh. So welcome to our program today, Tom Woods.
Ron and Daniel, it's a pleasure to be here.
Good. We consider you an expert. Although we have a homeschooling program and my name is attached to it, I also have to have some experts really helping me. And, of course, Gary North has been involved, but you're a course creator, and you've been working closely with that. So we want to start off, though, with a little bit of generalities about homeschooling, because we have a lot of listeners now to the program, and some are interested, but I think a little bit more information might help. Could you give us a little indication on what are your perceptions about homeschooling over the years? Maybe 10 years or so. What has happened? Is it escalating and growing exponentially, or is it a very gradual growth, or is there no growth at all? And what do you see in the future for homeschooling per se?
I think it's been growing very dramatically, and certainly in terms of cultural acceptance, it's been growing. My own wife was actually homeschooled back when people would say, wait a minute, are you even allowed to do that? Whereas today, people understand that there are all kinds of reasons people might even want to do it. There was a view some years ago that the only reason people would homeschool is for religious reasons. But it turns out there are a great many people who want to homeschool for a whole variety of reasons. And there are people on the left, on the right, in the middle, people who are libertarian, people who are not libertarian. They just feel that a one-size-fits-all approach it doesn't really work for them. So it's been extremely encouraging to see that you can engage in homeschooling, and there is now a huge infrastructure that's developed to support you in terms of social events, athletic events, all kinds of special events at museums and libraries just for homeschoolers. You don't feel like you're isolated, you're the weirdo. You've really been made to feel very welcome in many different social situations. That's wonderful.
Tom, that's absolutely right. I mean, we've taken advantage of, we homeschool our 3 children. We've taken advantage of so many special museum programs. It may have been a long time coming, but they've recognized that there's so many kids home during the week being schooled, and they have, so many different programs. I'm glad to hear you say that some of the old stereotypes are falling by the wayside. I fear with the success of homeschoolers, though, that the public school people are getting even more worried about homeschooling. So you do hear more of the stereotypes. Oh, the kids are so isolated. They're not socialized. And it's the funniest thing, because these kids are, I think, among the most socialized, at least in our experience of kids.
Well, and also I find that in general, they're the ones who are most able to have conversations with adults, and they're aware of what's going on in the world. I mean, they can handle themselves in a variety of social situations. So the accusation of socialization is really starting to backfire these days. You find these are the most sophisticated of the kids, the most polite, the friendliest, the most helpful. Now, I don't mean to say that it's impossible to have these good qualities in a traditional school setting. I went through a traditional school setting, but homeschoolers, there used to be this tremendous stereotype about them that they were backward and whatever. They would make their own clothes or whatever. And now you're finding that, homeschool kids actually are just like the kids down your street.
I first became very much aware of homeschoolers is when there were the early fights in the 70s in Texas. They tried to put all homeschooling out of business. But by the 70s and the 80s, when I'd go on campaign trips in the middle of the week during the school year, all of a sudden there'd be some kids there. And I was impressed. Well, I finally found out they weren't playing hooky. They were actually there for a purpose. And they would ask questions. And I was very impressed. So your point that there's a lot more adjustment from homeschoolers than anybody realizes. Give me an idea about what is available, because we have a precise goal, and we're not bashful about what we'd like to accomplish in our curriculum, and we're not going to be teaching Keynesian economics, and we're not going to teach Woodrow Wilson foreign policy. But what is out there? Is it all? I know there are some religious schools, and it delves into and promotes religion per se. But is there anything on the left? I'm trying to figure out what is the variety out there that is actually offered up. Of course, we're for variety. We want to defend variety, although we want a curriculum that people know exactly what we're looking for to bring about leadership in the freedom movement. But what do you know about the various courses that have been used in recent years?
Well, I'm afraid I don't know of anything that's expressly leftist that's catering toward homeschoolers, but it wouldn't surprise me to see more and more of that, because I suspect that the reasons people homeschool in Vermont are quite different from the reasons they might homeschool, let's say, in Alabama or Idaho or some other place. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that. I know that there is a wide variety of curriculum companies that you can find. A lot of them struggle with subjects like American history because frankly, it is impossible to find a decent American history textbook. So they're using textbooks from the 50s. They haven't been updated in 65 years. This is a bit of a problem. One of the benefits of your curriculum, Ron Paul curriculum, is that we don't get tied down by textbooks. They cost a lot of money. It's very, very rare to find a decent one anyway, and they're put together by committees. They just repeat the conventional wisdom, and they're boring. There's no kid in the world who ever said to his parents, "Thank heavens you bought me this textbook." None of them feel that way. So although there are a variety of curriculum companies out there, in terms of not using textbooks, focusing on primary sources, focusing on getting the students actually reading what the people said instead of what some textbook author wants them to know about what they said, this is definitely one of the benefits. And I would also note, by the way, that the way I pitch it, I have a site, ronpaulhomeschool.com, and my headline is not, "Hey, your kids will learn liberty." Yeah, that's great, and of course that's why I'm here. But the headline is, if you're a homeschooling parent, you're probably working too hard. And the idea of the Ron Paul curriculum is that it really is self-taught. After about the 4th grade, it's self-taught. You watch a video, you do a reading, and you do your assignment. And then you have Q&A forums where the students can interact with each other and they can tutor each other. But basically, it runs itself. And that's not something I'm familiar with elsewhere. And we've been around long enough now that we have parent testimonials. And these testimonials are from parents saying, "I finally have my mental health back." I mean, before I'm trying to keep up my house and I have younger kids I have to watch and I have to prepare lesson plans. If you want to use the Ron Paul curriculum, you have prepared the last lesson plan you will ever prepare in your entire life. And on top of that, not only will your kids get a top-notch education, but they won't have to go looking around the way the rest of us did to find out who Ludwig von Mises was or Frederick Bastiat was or what Austrian economics is. That'll be part of their curriculum. They won't have to go searching for it. Now, in the curriculum, by the way, we don't just say, well, here's the libertarian curriculum, and they over there have theirs and they have theirs. We do show you what the other side's arguments are. In my government course, I explain, here are the reasons people say government needs to do A, B, C, and D. The difference in our course is that in their courses, they'll never tell you, well, here are some arguments against it. But I do show, well, here's the other side. How about that? There is actually another side. Or here's why maybe you don't need a central bank. All you get in an economics course is why the Federal Reserve System is responsible for our prosperity. That's all you get. But there is another side of the story. It gets totally neglected. And so you'll get to keep your mental health, and your students will actually learn the sorts of things that you and I had to search around looking for because nobody was going to teach them to us.
You know, Tom, you mentioned textbooks. The one book that my 15-year-old son has read is Your Politically Incorrect Guide to History. And I don't know if I should praise you or condemn you because he comes running to me with all these questions. Well, what about this? And, I read that this was true, but Tom Wood says something very different.
Yeah.
So I've got to be on my toes. But, you mentioned you capture something really important, Tom, and that is the diversity of homeschooling. It's not simply a school that you'd go to, a public school, but transferred to home. There are so many different types of homeschoolers. There are the unschoolers who don't believe that you should really teach anything, that the kids discover on their own what they want. And there on the other end of the spectrum are those that are very rigidly in a program, there are many others like our family that sort of pick and choose what works. You know, you get a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think that's one of the attractiveness of the curriculum as well, is you can take courses as you wish. You can look at things that are important, that you feel that are important. You can supplement what you may do in other things with the Ron Paul curriculum. And I think that's one of the best things for our family that it has to offer.
Yeah, take the courses that you want to take. It's not like we say, well, you're in 8th grade, so you're officially signed up for all these courses. We don't even believe in that. Our view is that maybe there are some people in 8th grade who should be in 10th grade math and 7th grade history, whatever, and you just decide which course works for you. So you test it out, and you take 60 days with it, and if you say, this is too hard or too easy, then you get your money back and you try a different one. So it is great that you can tailor it for what you need. But then also, it's not like we just teach, we have math and science and literature and all that. But what we're also doing is courses that you won't find at all. It's not just this is our spin on them. These are courses you won't find at all. Like, for example, for teenagers, how to manage your own finances, personal finance, so that you don't get into debt. You learn how to manage spending and balance a checkbook, whatever. I mean, every teenager should be trained in this, and yet I don't know of anybody who's teaching that. We have a course in that, or we have a course in how to start your own home business, or how to be an effective public speaker. And this is another aspect of the curriculum, is that we don't want to just fill their brains with great information. That's a wonderful thing, but if it just sits there, then it becomes sterile. We want to train them to go out there and be persuasive, to be able to write effectively, to speak effectively, to know how to run a blog so that when you do graduate, you get out there, you can be contributing to the conversation. You'll be, it'll be old hat for you. It's the whole person here. It's not just the brain. It's the whole person we're trying to reach.
Tom, one thing that we've tried to do is have these choices, and there's a lot of those. But there's also the ability that if you decide that you want to go to college, you want to go to medical school, you have to orient that. So it's not like the kids can pick and choose what they do and they just go about it. But if they have a desire and they have to contend with some conventional testing and all, I think we make a sincere effort to help them achieve these goals rather than just saying, I don't know anything about those tests. Just go there. Maybe they'll let you in. Tell us a little bit about how we try to prepare these kids to compete in the real world of getting into a medical school or into a college.
Oh, there's great emphasis on CLEP exams and these sorts of advanced exams that people can use to get, first of all, it helps that you've taken some of these exams, but also you can, for when you're applying, but also when you're in college, you can use these exams for college credit and place out of certain subjects altogether. In fact, the young man Bradley Fish, who teaches some of the junior high courses, is a classic example of this. He entered college. As a matter of fact, he may have graduated college at age 18, like some crazy age. He entered really, really young, and he'd already placed out of 2 years' worth of college because he took CLEP exams. So if you have an especially ambitious student, again, with our courses, there's no timeline. You have to take a year or you have to take 9 months. If you can do it in 4 months, if you really hustle, you want to do that, you want to get some courses out of the way, you can take CLEP exams successfully on the basis of the information we teach you in these courses, and then you can save your parents a lot of dough by possibly placing out of a year or two of college. As I say, one of our own faculty members did this himself. So we do talk about how to do that. And yeah, we don't just leave you adrift. We don't just teach you stuff that no one would ever test on a test. It's all just libertarian stuff, and then no one's ever going to ask you about that. You learn the stuff that you would need to succeed on these tests, place out of these courses, save yourself some money, and start your life a year or two earlier. Think of all the earnings that you would have earned that you're spending in some classroom somewhere. We're going to restore those to you by possibly helping you to get through early.
Good. We're running out of time, but we have a couple short questions yet that we'd like to ask.
Yeah, Tom, we were talking before that we started here about the future of homeschooling, and we have something on the Institute website about the California vaccination law and how that is driving a lot of parents into homeschooling. And these aren't necessarily parents that are opposed to all vaccinations, but they don't like the government schedule where they don't get to choose which one where. They get a cocktail at a certain age of many things. And so these kids are not able now to go to public or private schools in California, and it's really causing a boom in homeschooling. How do you see the future of homeschool versus a state that I think will remain skeptical, a state with a capital S that will remain skeptical of this sort of thing?
Well, when you have something like homeschooling that so many people have latched onto, you get to a tipping point where it becomes pretty much impossible for the state to do much about it. In the beginning, you could be a persecuted minority, but today it's just growing too rapidly. I think not just the vaccination thing, but also there are a lot of families that do not approve of leftist social policy, and they're going to see this pushed more and more and more in the schools. I think that's going to drive more of them out. So I think the trend is definitely upward for those reasons.
Okay, Tom, I want to thank you very much for being with us today, and I'd like to close with a couple comments to our audience. Homeschooling to me is very important, and that's why I responded very favorably to both Tom and Gary North on proposing and helping to put this homeschooling program together. I'm really big into education, just like Tom is, and he still has education at the Mises Institute. He deals with that and also the books that he writes. But, of all the things that I do, even politically, I've always concentrated on education. And for me, it was sort of an educational bully pulpit because the politics sometimes was rather annoying to me. And I think that this program, to me, if it does what I expect and what I sense is already doing, introducing this could be one of the most important things that I have done and will leave. And that is a set of educational standards that we have here. And it doesn't happen overnight. We've been doing this for a couple years now, and our particular program is growing rather steadily. And it's mostly by word of mouth, and it's economically feasible, and you don't have to be very wealthy. Matter of fact, very modest income people, come and get these programs. So it is something I'm excited about because I believe sincerely that this is an answer to contradict so much misinformation that we get from the government schools. And Tom, you've been the expert in history, and Daniel already emphasized that one of your books is really challenging to one of his kids. And that is what we need. We need a clear understanding and match them up. Let them pick. And whether it's economic policy, it seems to me that I've always been so disappointed that non-interventionist foreign policy just didn't win hands down. And yet the propaganda is so bad. Why doesn't free markets win hands down over Keynesianism and socialism? Now we have Keynesians running for Congress as well as socialists. So we should do so much better. And I believe we live in a time where we are going through a transition. We're seeing the failure of all these programs, whether it's education or whether it's foreign policy or government programs or welfare. It's all going down the tubes. So this is why I see a tremendous opportunity in homeschooling. And I hope those of you who have listened and viewed this program will consider just looking up the ronpaulcurriculum.com and see if it would be something worthwhile for anybody in your family. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Go there and subscribe and check it out. Great reports that come out of there. And, the more government tries to control what the youth is learning, the more they'll try to crack down on homeschooling. But, again, it also becomes one that people look at and go, well, we need a homeschool. We're not given options in the public school system anymore. The private school system's getting so where they're having to basically favor to the Common Core curriculum to a extent, and because they're kind of established in the normal school setting, they kind of want to aim towards those same standards or, the curriculum, and that way the kids can take a test where, things like the Ron Paul's curriculum, it basically teaches them everything that the public school won't teach them, plus what the public school teaches them. Basically, this is where our beliefs and our morals, our philosophy stem from, just as, you know, public school systems push the socialist, fascist, or, type atmosphere. They're pushing more of a libertarian, freedom atmosphere, liberty atmosphere, where they'll show them, the other side. Kind of unlike public schools where, nope, the other side's bad, this is the way it is, and that's it. There's more types of curriculums out there, and I think there's been studies. You look at studies that say that children that are homeschooled by parents that don't have a college education are showing higher IQ levels than kids that have two parents with at least bachelor's, if not master's degrees, that go to either public or private school. And it kind of furthers along why you probably see a lot of the wealthier families pulling their kids out of school. And, we've seen enough of a lot of these elite kids that they were just, kind of left to the private school system by their parents, not much interaction. And when it comes time to take over the dynasty, they're pretty shit at it. So, I think we all can learn a lesson from past mistakes that the socialist schooling system does not work to actually further along a child into a young adult and then into, a adult. It's one of those things that we have to correct those mistakes by taking charge ourselves. Okay, I wasn't going to get into this right away, but I need to do something real quick. So, this one was from Ben Swan, craft beer and the government regulations. I think this is so important because it's something that a lot of libertarians, including myself, talk about. The regulations that allow monopolies. And it's not directly going here. Let's allow a monopoly. It's where these mega corporations help write the laws that the penalties of breaking those laws are such that smaller companies can't afford to break those laws, but the large corporations can't. Therefore, they can keep their grip on that monopoly. And then, you also have your regulated monopolies, meaning, your electric company, there can only be one. Government regulation, for a lot of people want to see, people want to see big corporations held accountable for their mistakes, but they forget that politicians and corporations go hand to hand. That's how our political system has been played for a long time. And whenever you call for regulation, they'll give it to you, and it'll be beneficial only to them. And this is the major thing that causes divide and conquer and all this um, in our society. It helps it along because it makes people dependent on others because they are not freely allowed to exercise their rights and their abilities. So let's go ahead and get into this real quick. Craft beer and the government regulations stifling innovation.
Hey guys, this is Josh Cook. Thanks for tuning in to my new show, Beer and Politics, and I'm going to interview the owner of Quest Brewing Company with my friend Dan Pope. Hope you enjoy. Folks, welcome back. I appreciate you tuning in to our podcast on the Truth and Media Network. My name is Joshua Cook, and I'm your host, and I'm really excited today because we have the owner of Quest Brewery, Don Richardson. We're in this beautiful facility in Greenville, South Carolina. And also I have Dan Pope, who's the founder of Pints for Liberty here in the upstate of South Carolina. So, guys, thank you so much for putting this together. And, I know we're going to have fun talking about a great product, and that's craft beer. So I wanted to start off, Don, tell us a little bit about why did you go into this business of the craft beer industry?
Well, I kind of fell into the craft beer industry. Back in my early 20s, I made a move from Atlanta, Georgia, spending some time in western North Carolina prior to that in college, and then decided to move out west, and I moved out to Boulder, Colorado in 1991. And, being just had turned 21 at that point, I was instantly intrigued with better beer and craft beer and these smaller producers, especially all of a sudden being submerged in it, in Colorado, and then also the access to West Coast, beers in that area. So I started working at Boulder Beer in 1992. I actually went in for a job just to pay the bills, and I kind of ended up on the bottling line there. Spent about 6 months just moving cases around and bottles and getting that done, and then I got the opportunity to move up into the brew house there at Boulder Beer. So I took that opportunity, still at that point, just kind of being a job. Once I kind of got into the brew house, I started home brewing at that point, so I kind of went backwards from what most people do that start home brewing and then go professional. I went professional and then started home brewing, in addition to brewing professionally. And so after I started home brewing for a little while and then brewing, there at Boulder Beer, I became very passionate about it. And then at that point, just started studying and trying to learn as much as I could about styles and just all of, the brewing industry at that point, which was pretty much non-existent in the East Coast. Coming back to my home in Atlanta, to visit my folks, there was hardly anything going on. So now it's really neat to see, the surge of breweries here in the South.
Yeah,
around here.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit of my history, how I kind of just fell into it. I was with Boulder Beer from 92 to 97, and then I moved up to Boone, North Carolina, and opened up the Cottonwood Brewery up there. And so I was up in Boone from 97 to 2000, and then we were bought out by Carolina Beer Company, and I moved to Mooresville, right outside of Charlotte, in 2000, and then I brewed with them for about 3 years. And then I did about an 8-year stint of, I was running my own company, brokering beers, mainly working with importers, a lot of Belgian beers and a lot of beers that were not available in this market because at that time in the mid, 2005, 2004, 2005, that was about the time the laws started changing. I think 2004 was Georgia, right, and then 2005 was North Carolina. So I was kind of on that side of things, bringing a lot of products in that weren't available and people didn't know about. So a good bit of my time in that was educating people, also working with distributors, which I learned the distribution side of the business. And after doing that for a few years, I was like, wow, this makes it, making beer look easy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel just as someone that is passionate about changing people's minds, sometimes I feel bad when I see the guy, drinking a lager, and I'm like, wow, really you need to try some craft beer, try to get some flavor in your life. And so they'll try it, and then they're just a convert. tell us. So tell us a little bit about the craft beer boom, and also what inspires your philosophy as far as the different flavor profiles that you choose.
Yeah, the different styles that we choose. As I mentioned, with selling beer and numerous trips to Belgium, the Belgian beers are a true love of mine. So we try to do a lot of that Belgian style. We very rarely brew pure German Reinheitsgebot.
Yeah.
We're typically brewing with different. Right now, we've got a watermelon wit beer on. We've got a cucumber jalapeno saison. So
you're pushing the outer limits.
We do, and we try to with the flavors. We also try to really try to focus our beers around balance and flavor profiles as well, and not trying to overdo something or make it over sweet. All of the fruit and vegetables that we're using right now in the brewing are all fresh. We prep them all here, puree them ourselves, so we're not using any concentrates or extracts. So that's one thing that we feel very strongly about. It's very labor intensive, but it's a labor of love. So, but yeah, that's one of our philosophies. Probably our most mainstream beer is our IPA. But I feel like IPAs is still,
still hot.
Still hot. It's still a big beer.
IPAs.
People love their hops. I love them myself.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of our more mainstream. When we ventured out and started brewing, we decided to go with the Belgian Pale Ale, just something a little different.
Do you do any porters?
We do. We do a smoked porter.
Okay.
So
that's a popular porter.
yeah, that's actually with our house yeast, which is a Belgian blend yeast. Very low ester producing. So it's not a full on Belgian, but it gets that nice little rounded ester character to it. Some cherry wood smoked malt in that beer as well.
Now let's talk about the watermelon wheat beer. It seems like a lot of the trend now is opening up to more where women are really attracted to trying beer. Whereas a couple of years ago, maybe not. But it seems like, man, there's a lot of females that are really interested in craft beer. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, that's
evolution?
definitely, and still, being here in the South and spent time in the West, that's a very an evolved, craft beer drinkers. So here, you've got folks that are there, but you got folks that are still trying to learn and still trying to figure out what they like, and maybe they don't like the big hop bomb or they don't like a big double, imperial stout or something like that.
Right.
So that's why we try to offer a few beers like that are kind of, we consider them more intro beers, kind of the beers with training wheels, but also, we like to brew beers like that people can get introduced, but also your beer connoisseurs can come back and say, oh, wow, that's a really nice, well-balanced beer, and that's interesting as well. So it's, it is fun when people come in to our place and have never been into a brewery, or have only been into a couple of breweries, really don't know that side, for us to really kind of teach them. Also, it's really good for us to kind of get our brands in front of them and kind of figure out what they like, and they can try, in our tasting room up to about 11 different beers that we have on tap at any given time. So it gives you a nice little variety.
Absolutely. And Dan, I'm going to bring you in because you talked about the North Carolina, South Carolina laws and how that affects the industry. What are you doing right now at Pints for Liberty as far as trying to change the laws and make South Carolina laws a little more beer friendly?
Well, right now, I mean, my biggest pet peeve in South Carolina is that we're losing so many jobs to North Carolina, and it's just right over the border in Asheville and Charlotte, just because, one, our taxes for alcohol sales, and then also our problem with our three-tier distribution network in South Carolina. North Carolina is unique in that you can self-distribute up to 25,000 barrels of beer a year, which is makes you a pretty big brewery to be brewing that much, and you can self-distribute up to, I think it used to be 25 miles, and now it's almost 150 now. And for a regional or small startup craft brewery, I mean, the ability to be able to go from top tier down to the actual retail package store really lets you compete with some of the bigger, more macro-sized breweries that are gobbling up a lot of the precious real estate and resources around, and also a lot of the precious retail real estate, which is a whole other issue. And that makes, breweries like Oscar Blues and Sierra Nevada and recently New Belgium, Stone, that makes them overlook South Carolina as an option, even though we've got great water, a great craft beer scene. We've got lots of good real estate and a really good highway network.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it really handicaps and handcuffs a lot of these big employers from coming here is a really big pet peeve.
Yeah.
Locally, we're working on we're going to be putting a lot of focus towards passing the Sunday alcohol sales referendum in Greenville County, so that any retailer, any wholesale store, and any restaurant can sell alcohol on Sunday and be able to compete on an equal level with downtown Greenville and the city of Malden that already have these laws in place, so that it's good for the local store.
And for people that are wanting to get involved with your movement, how do they get involved? Is there a Facebook page?
We'll be putting together a couple Facebook pages, but for the most part, just tune into Pints for Liberty. It's just facebook.com/pints, the number 4 Liberty. And that'll be a good way to keep abreast of what's going on. And then also come to the local monthly Pints for Liberty meetings.
You have a chapter.
Yeah,
that you meet.
here in Greenville we do.
Yeah, excellent. So how's the community in the Upstate? How do they view Quest Brewing? I know when I worked for a local retailer, you guys were really popular with your beer. So how are people receiving you when you first started?
I mean, it seems to be well. We hope so. But no, I think everything has been going very well for us for our first 2 years in. I feel like we are getting better and better as we.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. That goes on for a while, but you can find that at Ben Swan on YouTube or at truthandmedia.com, formerly benswan.com. Now, they're talking about local laws and how that restricts us, and we know that there are a lot of local laws. I know here in Indiana, they don't sell alcohol for takeout. You can go to the bar and drink, but you can't take alcohol home, which makes absolutely no sense. But it's one of those old, outdated laws that went back to the Christian way. You don't drink on Sundays, and it does stifle because, well, a lot of people just go to a different state to buy their alcohol if they want to buy alcohol on Sundays. Ohio has drive-through liquor on the border, or at least they did. I haven't, been that way for a while, but we have those problems. And you can fight those things at your local level a lot better than you can at the federal. But then there's another way to fight at the local level against federal. And that's using the 10th Amendment. That's allowing for state nullification. And we heard the little marijuana debate between Rand Paul and others in the debate, pointing out, believe in the 10th Amendment and the Constitution until we get to this subject. And, believing in the 10th Amendment, believe that it's a belief that, each state isn't, individual state. It's a united front. Only one that's united. States can nullify federal laws, as Colorado did with marijuana, and other states have. And when we have federal laws and regulations that are preventing citizens from starting something, when you can nullify that for, internally in your state, the person that, grows a whole bunch of apples and makes apple cider does not have to go and worry about what the FDA says. They can make that cider and sell it. Little shack outside the property and freezers and fridges, and we have a few of those here in Indiana. And when federal laws or regulations start stifling that, we need to make sure that we do nullify those laws, that the state puts on the books that they're not going to, go by those laws. They're not going to enforce those laws, and they're not going to allow others. And that, goes back to the sheriff and being able to, there was one up here in northern Indiana, western Indiana, and they kicked I believe it was the FDA out when they were harassing the Amish over raw milk. So sheriffs can play a major role in that. Clive and Bundy was calling for the sheriff to do something in his area, which is probably why maybe the sheriff's willingness to just kind of sit there and watch it play out should have been a cue to many citizens there. The sheriff should have been like, you know what? Feds, get the hell out. We'll deal with this. You're just causing more problems. That's really what it should have came down to. Okay. Give me a second here. Now, since we're kind of talking about nullification and all that, I've seen this article here from Truth and Media. Minors face unintended felony charges for pot under Washington recreational cannabis law. Says here 3 teens ages 14, 15, and 17 are facing felony charges for pot possession in the U.S. state of Washington, where recreational marijuana possession is illegal. According to NPR, a lesser-known provision in a new law, SB 5052, which was aimed at consolidating taxes and regulations between the state's medical and recreational marijuana industries, has stiffened the penalty for pot possession by individuals under 21 from a misdemeanor punished by up to 90 days in jail to a Class C felony with a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison. Jamie Smith, a spokesperson for Democratic Washington Governor Jay Inslee, said in comments cited by the Associated Press, "I can only tell you that this was not the intention that the governor had when working with legislators on the bill," Smith added. "There are other ways to discourage marijuana use by minors without charging them with felonies." Governor Inslee signed the bill into law earlier this year. Senator Ann Rivers, Republican, who sponsored the bill, said the provision was intended to discourage minors from using marijuana. "We have to send a message to our kids. This will hurt you in more ways than one if you decide to participate," she said. Well, that's contradictory from passing a law that says, yes, you can use it for medical or recreational use. But if you're a kid and you ever get involved in this is what'll happen to you. No, you passed a law that says when I get older, so really it becomes experimentation. I know kids that have and have not experimented in alcohol when they were younger. Now adults, of course, but when they were kids, some decided to, some decided not. With marijuana, some decided to, some decided not. With cigarettes, some decided to, some decided not. Some of them wouldn't drink milk, not because they were lactose intolerant, just because they didn't like milk. One of those things that they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and that's the whole reason we're nullifying these laws. And I think that's one thing Rand Paul tiptoes around when he talks about it. Still uses the rhetoric talking about it as it's something extremely negative. Well, yeah, anything could have a negative consequence when abused and not used for maybe a purpose that would be legitimate for a person. If all you do is smoke, eat chips, and fall asleep on the couch all the time, maybe then, and order pizza because, well, you don't want to even get up off the chair, but for the couch, you weigh 300 pounds. Maybe it's not that beneficial for you. Maybe someone that right before they go to sleep, they take a couple hits because they have problems sleeping. Their alternative is a pharmaceutical that might cause extreme side effects that they don't have to experience. Maybe epilepsy, the people that are being cured by that. Maybe, let's think, cancer, cannabis oil. And there's a clip I want to play here in a minute, but I'll get to it here in a minute. But I want to say, Ben Swan points out we need to stop going marijuana or it's cannabis. Some cannabises have a lot of THC, which is what gets you high. Some have extremely low, where you're not going to get high. But there's legitimate uses for it that even the government holds patents for. That study after study keeps pointing in the direction, hey, this stuff actually has benefits. But we constantly have politicians and judges talk about how bad it is. And try to find something real quick. Sorry. I'm trying to find the article, but I'm not finding it here. Thought I bookmarked it, but I must have not. Huh. But we do have more and more things coming out that, hey, this stuff has been positive in people's lives. I'm checking in our website, so I'm kind of. Okay, here's one. This one's been going around Facebook quite a bit. Big Pharma profiteering douchebag Martin Shkreli is actually the evil villain Loki from the Avengers. If you've been paying any attention to a lot of talk about this, it says here, file this under the category of no friggin' way. The internationally condemned big pharma douchebag named Martin Shkreli, now famous for raising the price of what used to be a dollar drug for treating infections to $750 per pill. Looks almost exactly like the evil interdimensional villain Loki from the Avengers. Something creeped me out about this guy from the very first moment I saw him. He looked like a villain. That's why I wrote this natural news article. Let's get further down in here. Yep, the price gouging big pharma douchebag used to be a hedge fund manager. While taking money from people as a hedge fund manager is easy peasy, it's even easier to build billions out of the masses by running a pharmaceutical company. Just buy up the rights to your favorite drug and then hike the price up 5,000% or more, all while billing Medicare and Medicaid for the fees. Loki, whom I think is also Thor's stepbrother, sought to enslave humanity using the hypnotic power of his magic staff. Blah, blah, blah. But you look at what goes on with pharmaceuticals, the amount of risks that come along with the pills and things that you take. You look at the price gouging. Just look at a lot of other countries' price on the same type of pills, a lot lower. Problem a lot of times in those countries is getting the prescription for the pill, getting in to see the doctor before it becomes something worse. But their pills are cheaper. That's why they love stopping Canadian drugs. Oh yeah, you're just getting Chinese knockoffs, and they're not what they say they are. They're poison. When in reality, that's not the truth. A lot of them are people that get prescriptions and sell them for the money to go do hard drugs. That happens quite a bit. It even happens here. There's a lot of backdoor sales of pharmaceuticals in Canada too. So, you look at things like marijuana and you see the fighting against it, and it's really ridiculous. Which kind of brings me to this Ben Swan clip here, reality check. So I want to go ahead and get to that.
It didn't get much time in the CNN debate, but the issue of marijuana did come up at issue. Are these candidates actually hypocrites for their views on marijuana? And do they know what they're talking about, or are they just selling fear? This is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. Well, during last week's CNN debate, there were a lot of issues that came up, frankly, and mostly the candidates talked about each other. But in the slim sections that dealt with policy, one issue had some fairly interesting responses: marijuana.
There's at least one prominent example on the stage of someone who says they smoked pot in high school, and yet the people who are going to jail for this are poor people, often African Americans and often Hispanics, and yet the rich kids who use drugs aren't.
So 40 years ago, I smoked marijuana. And I admit it. I'm sure that other people might have done it and may not want to say it in front of 25 million people. My mom's not happy that I just did.
So Jeb Bush admits that 40 years ago he smoked marijuana. And he's probably right that at least some of the other candidates who are running against him for president have as well. So what? The real issue here is the one of hypocrisy. Does Bush or other politicians have one set of standards for themselves and a one set for others?
And it is hypocritical to still want to put poor people in jail.
I don't want to put poor people in jail, Raymond.
Well,
here's the deal.
You oppose medical marijuana?
No, I did not oppose when the legislature passed the bill to deal with that very issue. That's the way to solve this problem. Medical marijuana on the ballot was opened up. There's a huge loophole. And it was the first step towards getting to a Colorado place. And as a citizen of Florida, I voted no.
So Bush voted against medical marijuana as a private citizen only? Actually, no, that's not true. In 2014, the Tampa Bay Times reported that Bush did, in fact, campaign against Florida's medical marijuana initiative, saying, quote, "I strongly urge Floridians to vote against Amendment 2 this November." The medical marijuana bill in Florida did fail. Then Carly Fiorina jumped in.
My husband Frank and I buried a child to drug addiction. So we must invest more in the treatment of drugs. I agree with Senator Paul. I agree with states' rights. But we are misleading young people when we tell them that marijuana is just like having a beer. It's not. And the marijuana that kids are smoking today is not the same as the marijuana that Jeb Bush smoked 40 years ago.
So let's talk about those two claims. Is marijuana like having a beer? Well, no. It's actually safer. According to the federal government's National Survey on Drug Use and Health, finds that marijuana causes fewer trips to the emergency room than alcohol or even over-the-counter pharmaceuticals per 1,000 users. Here's another. According to the CDC, 1 in 10 deaths among working-age adults can be attributed to excessive alcohol use. Alcohol poisonings account for more than 2,000 American deaths every year. Well, meanwhile, most experts say there has never been a documented overdose death from marijuana use in someone without an underlying condition. So what Fiorina says there about alcohol versus beer, it isn't true. But what is also not true, that marijuana led to the death of her daughter.
My husband Frank and I buried a child to drug addiction.
But that drug was not marijuana. In fact, according to Fiorina's own book, Rise to the Challenge, she claims it was her stepdaughter's struggles with alcohol, prescription pills, and bulimia that led to her death at age 35. It's at the end of the first prologue that Fiorina writes this, quote, Lori's potential was never fulfilled, but death is not the only thing that crushes potential. What I also know is that Americans are failing to achieve their potential today. So what you need to know is that while technically Fiorina didn't say which drug was responsible for her stepdaughter's death, she was entirely dishonest by making the next statement out of her mouth about marijuana use. Why isn't Carly Fiorina calling for a ban on prescription drugs? Why not a ban on alcohol? We've already tried that. Meanwhile, marijuana, which should be called cannabis really here, comes in hundreds of strains. And today, tens of thousands of American families are benefiting from cannabis oil. It's helping to cure children with epilepsy and treating people who are dying of cancer. Fiorina's statements and the policies she advocates would rob those families of hope while doing nothing to prevent the tragedy that she and her husband went through. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that tonight on Twitter.
Ben Swan on YouTube, truthandmedia.com. Check it out. Now, we know that this war on drugs has helped feed the private prison industry, and a lot of these local laws that do that, which the one we went over in Washington that the 2 teens are going to have to deal with, or the 3 teens, these laws are snuck into all these bills to fulfill an obligation that a lot of these counties or cities or states have agreed to when it comes to these private prisons, where they say that they will keep it at a certain capacity. Well, you can't say that you're truly out there trying to stop crime, actual crime, if you're having these large prisons being built with the obligation to fill them to a certain capacity. So what happens when you do have a community that is very low on crime? You write a law to make something criminal. This is also a control mechanism. You know, we always hear about, the elites want to kill off so many people. They don't have to. They put you in prison. They keep a certain amount of the populace in prison. That is a control mechanism. That's inhumane a lot of times because these people are not dangerous. They're not violent. They might be doing something that's stupid, but definitely when they're not abridging anybody's rights, they're harming themselves because they choose to put something in their body, which plenty of people put too much food in their body or the wrong type of food in their body or alcohol in their body, and that's not a criminal thing, but, we'll just call this substance criminal. We know prohibition doesn't work. It's there for a reason. And I think a lot of these politicians know it, are disingenuous, and are only fulfilling obligations that they feel that they have. Okay, give me a second here. Sorry, give me a second here. Okay, so I'm having issue here. I'm trying to get it to come up. I'm going to do it on a different device here. Okay, here from CNBC.com, estimated 5.6 million had fingerprints stolen and hacked. The Office of Personal Management announced Wednesday that 5.6 million people are now estimated to have their fingerprint information stolen. That number was originally thought to be about 1.1 million, OPM said in a statement. About 21.5 million individuals had their social security numbers and other sensitive information affected by the hack. According to OPM, federal experts believe that as of now, the ability to misuse fingerprint data is limited. The office acknowledged, however, that future technologies could take advantage of this information. A interagency working group to include FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Defense Department representatives plans to review the implications of stolen fingerprint data, according to OPM. U.S. officials have privately blamed the breach on Chinese government hackers, but they have avoided saying so publicly. For its part, Beijing has denied any involvement. Officials also have said no evidence has surfaced yet suggesting that stolen data has been abused, though they fear the theft could present counterintelligence problems. And this is why I have a big problem with biometrics and the whole ID system. It plays too much into, what they want to push, and it's divide and conquer. Are you a part of the system? Are you not? If you're not a part of the system, you're not putting your fair share in. And other people, you're a part of the system. You're the reason why I'm being forced to, submit. And I think the latter of the two has argument one. If you voluntarily go into a system is one thing. To be forced into a system a lot of times is another, and that's what you tend to get the more government you have. Because in reality, government is a monopoly on force. Here's another one about technology. Intelligent car seat detects driver's stress level. ca.news.yahoo.com. Keeping calm behind the wheel could get easier thanks to a new car seat that actively monitors a driver's physical and mental status to offer an on-the-move therapy session. The Active Wellness Seat is the world's first health monitoring car seat, according to automotive suppliers Furushia. It uses a biometric sensing system built into the seat lining that can detect if the driver has a drop in energy levels or is under stress that responds with a specific message pattern along with airflow through the seat's ventilation system. The Active Wellness Seat is Furushia's vision on the next level of personalized comfort, said Olaf Biderman, Director of Innovation at Furushia. What we basically do is to monitor respiration rate and heart rate in the seat, and we derive stress and energy level from that. Then having this kind of wellness being information, now we can offer closed loop comfort system. So in case you are stressed, you get a relaxation massage. In case you have low energy levels, you get a very energizing massage. And the article goes on, but you know what this kind of reminds me of? A movie where the car goes, "You seem stressed. Take this pill. You seem stressed. Here's a shot." You know, it really kind of starts feeding into a lot of those sci-fi movies. Well, they're not too sci-fi anymore. They're becoming reality, and with driverless cars and all this, you know, it's like a mix between Minority Report, The Matrix, everything that's ever tried to warn people, it's coming true. Or, you know, 1984 is here. We are in a system that is monitoring you all the time, and it's a real hard system to stay out of. And if you're someone like me or any other radio host or a lot of people out there that are trying to make waves, make that splash to, you know, send a message that we're not going to, you know, just conform to your control mechanisms. We're out there. We can't just stay out of the system. So, you know, some people want to go, you know, I don't want to use Facebook, but in a world where you being able to prosper, and a lot of times, you know, create a good company, and, you know, you have to be involved in social media. And that's the society we're in now. And a lot of the older people that I've seen that are small business owners have really realized that they've hired someone to do their social media, come out and take pictures, and, you know, they'll post pictures on Twitter once it's all set up for them. Someone comes and sets it up, puts their bio up there, and, sets it up on their phone so then they can take a picture and post it. One Orchard, they've done that. There's a lot of small businesses that are realizing, you get that. I never thought I'd be on Facebook, but, this is something I had to do for the company, and it's working out really well. Yeah, because that's where it is. These newer generations are not going to be reached through a newspaper. It's not happening. It's the age of technology that is where you find your information. And if you're not a part of it, you're probably not going to get noticed as easily. Okay, I wanted to cover one more clip here. That's what I'm going to have time for too, so. And this one is Adam versus Alternative Media TV, Christopher Green. Let's go ahead and get into this here.
At our sponsor, the Safe and Vault store right now. That's a Safe and Vault store. Click the link below right now. Check out all their safes, their rifle, gun, burglar safes. Check out their Liberty biometric safe, which they sent me. It's awesome. Protect your guns. Click that link below right now. Visit our sponsor. That's the Safe and Vault store. Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2015. And in today's video, you'll learn the real reason the Federal Reserve of the United States, even though it's not from the United States, isn't a part of the United States, actually a private company, it's not public at all, the real reason they won't raise interest rates, the real reason Janet Yellen won't hike. What could be so severe that would prevent Janet whore, criminal, scumbag Yellen from raising interest rates? Why would she prevent savers in this country from getting a rate of return? Why would they artificially suppress rates at zero forever, going on a period of 10 years where there has not been a hike? I believe it was a Reuters journalist even asked Janet Yellen on Thursday whether or not they would just hold interest rates at zero forever. To what should have been the mainstream media's astonishment, yet they haven't even reported on this, she actually answered she couldn't take that possibility off the table. That she, in fact, might keep interest rates at zero forever. In fact, the next hike in interest rates will actually be negative. There was a CNBC report that came out over the weekend, which I tweeted out. I sent it out via Twitter. Make sure to subscribe at AMTV Media. That suggested that during the next crisis, this came from a professor urging the Fed to implement this, that during the next crisis, the next crash like 2008 and 2009, where people's homes get foreclosed on, they got to turn in their Escalades and Mercedes that they can't afford, because it was based on the bullshit funny money system of 0% interest rates and liquidity in the first place, which again is a money illusion created by nothing and out of nothing so that the big banks can pickpocket you and then make money on the upside and then basically force bailouts through the hand of a gun like they did in 2008 and 2009, and by the way, got away with it. Not a single presidential candidate's even talking about it. But they're keeping rates at zero into infinity, not even raising 25 bips or 50 bips, but instead are going to actually move rates into negative territory, like what we've seen in Europe, in the Eurozone periphery countries. That's the tool in the tool shed that makes up Janet whore Yellen during the next crisis. Instead of a hike, when the market corrects more than its current 10% and there's a crash, we'll just take rates, in theory, I guess, into infinity, into crazy town. That's such crazy talk. I want you to imagine this for a minute, that they start taking rates into negative territory. We've already actually had real negative interest rates, but if they have and purposely put interest rates below zero, we will have an environment where, let's say, a saver wants to deposit $1, at your local bank or credit union because you're a saver, and you want to save for your future, like plan for your retirement and stuff, or save for your kid's college education or something, or maybe put it away for a rainy day. You'll deposit your cash dollar backed by nothing, based on nothing, created from nothing, from a criminal Federal Reserve, not attached to gold or commodity or anything. You'll deposit your dollar, and they will credit the system digitally. It's all moving digital. This is what's happening now. Only 98 cents. So you'll have a negative 2% rate of return on your single dollar deposit. And people ask me why I invest in things like gold and silver, why I diversify my basket. This is the type of insanity we're moving to. So what's the reason? I mean, what's the underlying reason? Why can't they raise rates? If the Federal Reserve, according to them, has a dual mandate to maintain employment and price stability, and their funny money fakery, their number is at like 5% for unemployment right now, and the stock market has rallied 2 to 3 times since the 2008 and 2009 trough, why can't they bump at least 25 bips? Notice how the stock market actually corrected 10% on just the idea that was coming from people's minds, the idea that they would raise 25 bips. I mean, the Federal Reserve could have even risen rates instead of 25 or 50 bips. They could have raised like 15 bips or 18 bips or 8 bips. They could have made some move, but they didn't. And the reason is this system is so fragile. There's so much fakery. It's built on such an illusion and such a foundation of sand. If they even hike 25 basis points or less, the entire system will crash and burn. I mean, what would Americans do if they didn't have access to 0% credit? What would the hedge funds do if they weren't banging Janet Hoare Yellen for those 0% interest rates? Again, the hedge funds borrow at zero at the Federal Open Market window, then trade 20-to-1 leverage on a single dollar that they borrow for free and jack up our markets, creating even larger bubbles. And then they pay taxes through a carried interest loophole of only 20% capital gains tax rate when the ordinary guy pays up to 40% ordinary income, your truck driver or your nurse or your General Joe on the street. Pays up to 40%, while the hedge funds, some of these guys make $100 million a year or more. I'm serious. They make like $100+ million a year, some of these guys, and they only pay 20% versus the 40% some high-income wage earners like nurses and firefighters, et cetera, do in this country. This has been talked about a little bit during the presidential debates. It's such a crisis. Things are so fragile. It's such an illusion that the Fed just can't raise rates. We've talked about this for years. They can't because it will crash the entire system. That would be the black swan. Again, they got to keep the herd and the masses drinking this liquidity, inhaling and swallowing all the fluoride, mesmerizing them with all this mainstream media propaganda. I mean, go out, buy a Mercedes, take out 15 credit cards, margin yourself to the hilt, buy the house you can't afford, lube it up into infinity before the next great crash. It's exactly what's happening now. I mean, have we not learned from any of our mistakes? How is it that we've already forgot about the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis? Notice how every single one of these scumbags have gotten away with it. They have literally gotten away with murder. They stole from you through the power of a gun. Didn't ask. They didn't take a vote. Stole trillions and trillions of friggin' dollars from you and won. Not even a single one of these presidential candidates is talking about it. Maybe Bernie Sanders a little bit. I admire him for that. Rand Paul's talked about this. Ron Paul, more importantly, talked a lot about this. That should be our number one focus, folks. If I ran for president, the number one talking point that would make up my agenda would be end the criminal Federal Reserve, this private criminal enterprise that is basically just shaking Americans by their heels, stealing. It's wrong, and it will not end well. Really, this is our greatest fear, folks, because we have never seen anything like this in the history of the world. Every great civilization will crash and burn. We see this in history. Whether or not it was Rome or any other great civilization will crash and burn as a byproduct of spending too much, as a byproduct of leverage, of a byproduct of imperialism or these wars overseas. Also notice, I wanted to touch on this a little bit, that during the presidential debates, they kept talking about Syria. We've been talking about this for years, how this is a part of the agenda. More war. They're not de-escalating out of the Middle East, they're escalating. Senator Lindsey Graham of North Carolina even suggested that he would deploy up to 20,000 new troops to Syria and Iraq to build upon our existing 3,000 troops that we already have there. See how it's a part of the agenda? You see how the Federal Reserve is now not just the Federal Reserve of the United States, even though it's private and not public at all, and nobody really knows that. Most of the uneducated masses don't know that drink the Kool-Aid. It's not just policing the U.S., they're policing the entire world. Their blame game, the reason for not raising interest rates, a measly 25 basis points or less during the recent FOMC meeting, was because of China, because of the worries and commodity prices, and China's markets crashing. Now, they will always be able to pick a country in the hundreds and hundreds around the world that isn't doing well, or an economy that isn't doing well at a given point of time. So it's very convenient for them to play this blame game. Now, the Federal Reserve has lost all credibility at this point. They have zero credibility. Anybody that is smart enough to just do this, which, can be difficult for some people, but do this, can come to terms with this. It is absolute insanity. The real reason the Federal Reserve will not raise interest rates is because they can't. This is how bad off we are. This is how serious the situation is. They would rather hurt savers, hurt retirees, actually take interest rates into negative territory during the next crisis and launch another round of quantitative easing, QE4, or they'll come up with some other name to massage the real truth, than they would do what's right, which is basically get out of debt, right-size the country, our system, our economy, put people back to work, charge these criminals on Wall Street and at the Federal Reserve with crimes. They would rather do the opposite of all of that. Again, it is amazing to me that these people actually got away with it. They scapegoat Bernie Madoff, and he was a very bad person, but they scapegoat him and every single last one of these other scumbags that have created, caused, fabricated, orchestrated the crisis post-September 11th to steal from you, sail off into the sunset. And nobody cares. Nobody even talks about it. It's not even a talking point during these debates. This is insane. It only proves what the real agenda is. Again, the same reason they're letting all these migrants in Europe. We're letting migrants coming in from Mexico. It's not to help these people. Most of them aren't Syrian refugees. The whole reason is it accelerates the collapse. It increases the debt. It inverts the upside down pyramid and accelerates the agenda that implements this new world order. This is the agenda of these elites, of the families that actually really govern and own the world, and even owns Wall Street. Again, the rabbit hole digs deep, folks. This is all a part of this illusion. It's all a part of this system. And if we continue to allow the Federal Reserve to exist, and we don't demand our politicians and this phony one-party system that makes up this, if we don't demand it, we are all responsible for it. We are all at fault. We can ignore it. We can put our head in the sand. But if we do not demand real change, we are a part of this criminal enterprise. We are a part of this criminal institution. We are helping to encourage criminal bailouts. We are allowing ourselves to be stolen from. It's time the American people that are far stronger in unison, are far stronger together, take responsibility for their own lives. Point out the criminal agenda and fraud that is being committed right before our very eyes. Hold each and every single one of these GOP candidates and these Democratic candidates, hold them to these principles. Talk about it, email it, call them on it, get in front of their faces and demand they answer your questions. End the criminal Federal Reserve today. Do it for yourself, do it for your children, do it for this country. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.
Christopher Green, AMTV. The Fed's going to raise interest rates. When they do, I think the longer they're holding it at the zero, the worse it's going to be. And this is another reason why, we're constantly talking about, letting the free market decide interest rates. And why is that important? Because you don't artificially keep them low to the point when you do go raise them that it's a shock to the system to the point that it can cause another depression. And we know that they've been wanting to raise interest rates, but we also know that they know what's going to happen when they do. And all it is delaying and delaying the inevitable. And our monetary policy is not really brought up in any debates anymore. Ron Paul, I think, was the last person to bring that up. A real legitimate argument against our monetary policy. We have so many policies in America that are just completely screwball. Let's see where we are on time. Okay. A little less than a half hour. Probably about 20 minutes. A lot of talk about the Pope being in town. Opening text off a Drudge Report. MarketWatch.com. Pope Francis prepared remarks at the White House. Pope Francis delivered his first address in the U.S. as he met President Barack Obama at the White House on Wednesday morning. Here's the Pope's remarks as prepared for delivery. I am deeply grateful for your welcome in the name of all Americans. As the son of an immigrant family, I am happy to be a guest in this country, which was largely built by such families. I look forward to these days of encounter and dialogue in which I hope to listen to and share many of the hopes and dreams of the American people. During my visit, I will have the honor to address Congress, where I hope, as a brother of this country, to offer words of encouragement to the nation's political future and fidelity to its founding principles. I will also travel to Philadelphia for the 8th World Meeting of Families to celebrate and support the institutions of marriage and the families at this, a critical moment in the history of our civilization. Mr. President, together with their fellow citizens, American Catholics are committed to building a society which is truly tolerant and inclusive, to safeguarding the rights of individuals and communities, and to rejecting every form of unjust discrimination with countless other people of goodwill. They are likewise concerned that efforts to build a just and wisely ordered society respect their deepest concerns and the right to religious liberty, that freedom remains one of America's most precious possessions, and as my brothers, the United States bishops, have reminded us, all are called to be vigilant precisely as good citizens to preserve and defend that freedom from everything that would threaten or compromise it. Mr. President, I find it encouraging that you are proposing an initiative for reducing air pollution. It talks about individual rights, but what this will do is stifle individual rights, playing into the climate change BS. I find it encouraging that you are proposing an initiative for reducing air pollution. Accepting the urgency, it seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living in a critical moment of history. We still have time to make the changes needed to bring about a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. Such change demands our part a serious and responsible recognition not only of the kind of world We may be leaving our children, but also the millions of people living under a system which has overlooked them. Our common home has been part of this group of the excluded, which cries out to heaven and which today powerfully strikes our homes, our cities, our societies. To use a telling phrase of the Reverend Martin Luther King, we can say that we have defaulted on a promissory note, and now is time to honor it. We know by faith that the Creator does not abandon us. He never forsakes His loving plan or repents of having created us. Humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. As Christians, inspired by this certainty, we wish to commit ourselves to the conscious and responsible care of our common home. And you know, it's really funny that he would play this, because what's a carbon tax going to do for you? Well, it's going to take money out of the poor people's pocket. Very, very little effect to the rich people's pocket. Well, why would he care? Right here, Kit Daniels put out an article. You can find it at Infowars.com. Pope's flights to Cuba and U.S. emit more CO2 than 557,000 pounds of coal. While demanding urgent action against man-made climate change, Pope Francis is flying around on a Boeing 777-200, which spews nearly 100 pounds of carbon dioxide per mile. The Boeing 777-200 uses slightly over 5 gallons of jet fuel per mile, and given the density of the hydrocarbon dodecane used in jet fuel at 2,839 gallons, and that 1 gram per gallon, and that 1 gram of dodecane produces around 3.1 grams of carbon dioxide. It says Pope's flights from Rome to Cuba, Washington, D.C. to New York, Philadelphia, and then back to D.C. and to Rome will total around 11,500 miles. So overall, the pontiff will emit around 572 tons of CO2 during his trip. To put that in perspective, 572 tons is the same carbon footprint as burning over 557,000 pounds of coal over 1,200 barrels of crude oil. It's also the equivalent of over 1.2 million miles driven by a car that gets 21 miles per gallon, and it's 47 times the amount of energy a single middle-class household uses annually. Yet the Pope is demanding that Americans cut back on their lifestyle and pay carbon taxes to fight so-called man-made climate change. It seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to the future generations, he said at a speech outside the White House on Wednesday. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment in history. We still have time to make changes needed to bring about the sustainable, integral development, for we know that things can change. So if Francis actually believes in so-called global warming, why doesn't he start cutting down on his international flights and by turning down the air conditioning he enjoys at the Vatican? And again, you can find that at Infowars.com by Kit Daniels. And it's the same type of hypocrisy we get out of government politicians. And we have the Pope running around playing a world leader. He forgets he's the leader of the Catholics, not the leader of the world. Completely overlooked and missed. Now, depending on how long this clip is, because I just seen it, and I'd like to play it, if I can find it again. Oh, we'd be pushing it. Let me play part of this. I'll try to skip ahead a little bit, maybe. But this is Judge Napolitano on Pope Francis. Okay, here we go. Let's hurry up and get into it. It's 7 minutes, but I probably won't play it all here.
Of the individual over the state and absolute freedom of the individual to make his or her own choices. That's actually also the teachings of Jesus Christ. I have come to set you free.
Thanks much.
Old as in duration of friendship.
A little bit. This Pope was a very intriguing character. Seems kind of American to me on one sense. He doesn't embrace the trappings of office as much as previous popes did. He has this sort of humble connection with people. At the same time, he kind of puts America at the head of the neoliberal economic order, which he's highly critical of him. What is the importance of this trip for him, do you say?
Pope Francis is a challenge and an obstacle to traditionalist Roman Catholics, as I am. I emphasize traditionalist. I wouldn't have said that if this were pre-Vatican II, but post-Vatican II, one must distinguish between being Catholic and being traditional. So by traditional, I mean I attend a Latin Mass where the priest faces the altar and where sermons are traditional theological and philosophical statements rather than comments on politics or sports or the types of things one often hears in a regular Roman Catholic Mass today. I don't know why the Pope is coming to the United States other than to spread an aura of goodwill about Roman Catholicism. He is so likable and well-liked, in part by our colleagues in the media, in part by the liberal intelligentsia, in part by the silence of traditionalists who show deference and respect to him.
Do you see him as sort of sharply modernizing or bucking tradition? Is he making a pretty sharp turn in things like speeding up annulments or things like that?
Well, speeding up annulments, in the view of this traditionalist Roman Catholic, is a rejection of his papal role. One of the jobs of the Pope is to preserve tradition and to protect the sacraments. By speeding up annulments at the same time as permitting ordinary confession to absolve the sin of abortion, which Roman Catholicism has taught for 400 years is murder. He has assaulted matrimony. For him to make annulments easier is a backdoor towards permitting divorce. And that is a direct frontal assault on the sacrament of matrimony.
So you don't like him on tradition. You must love him on economics and global warming.
Well, the Pope is the vicar of Christ on earth. He is infallible on faith and morals. Thank God it is limited to faith and morals. The Pope's views on economics are what judges call dicta. That is, where a judge in a written opinion says something utterly unrelated to the argument in the opinion, and it is merely his or her opinion. The Pope is entitled to his opinion on any matter of economics that has nothing to do with human salvation. Now, I'm in the Ayn Rand school of economics. I believe in no interference in the free market by the government. I believe the only moral commercial transactions are those that are truly and wholly and fully voluntary, not interfered with, not provoked, not even encouraged by the government. The Pope is, by his own words, a Peronist. He is probably also a communist, lowercase c, and a Marxist, uppercase m, who does believe that the government ought to control and motivate the means of production and the means of distribution.
Do you think that these opinions, given his role, can do tangible harm?
Well, of course they can do tangible harm because they encourage governments in areas where there's the open interplay of ideas to move away from the free market and towards more government control. For heaven's sakes, the Pope says we can do this. Let's go ahead and do it. That's the type of argument which I expect to be made in light of his assaults on capitalism. It will be a little odd, Matt, if he comes here next week and directly on the floor of the House of Representatives assaults capitalism. What remains of capitalism in the world exists here. It would be bizarre for him to attack it at its core.
We might also talk about global warming. Why shouldn't? I know you're saying that the Pope, has very specific and kind of limited duties here, enumeration of duties here. But if the Pope believes the world's going to burn up because of carbon in 50 years, shouldn't the Pope say something about that?
Yes, the Pope is entitled to say whatever he wants, but in a papal exhortation or in an encyclical, which for 2,000 years have been used for the purposes of teaching the faithful faith and morals, that's not the place for it. If the Pope wants to say at some gathering in the Vatican, by the way, I think global warming is out of control and we ought to turn down our air conditioners, he can say that.
Not have air conditioners.
Right. He can say that, and quite frankly, who cares? But when he uses the trappings of office and when he uses the means traditionally used by his predecessors to teach in matters of faith and morals, it's the wrong place and sends the wrong message. It gives an aura of the imprimatur, lowercase I, of the church with respect to economic and political activities, and I don't want that, and that's not why he's the Pope.
I want to talk to you about the interplay between your own sense of Catholicism and libertarianism. You were talking earlier about some of the traditions that you embrace. They're not traditionally the kind of traditions that a libertarian socially would embrace in the United States. How does your own sense of Catholicism inform and interplay with your sense of libertarianism?
The essence of libertarianism is the primacy of the individual over the state. And as far as is conceivable, absolute freedom of the individual to make his or her own choices. That's actually also the teachings of Jesus Christ. I have come to set you free. Now, I know the devil can quote scriptures to suit his purposes, but the doctrine on religious freedom, the doctrine on free will, is such that free will is the greatest gift God gave us. It is so perfect a gift that we are free to abuse it. And history and the modern era is filled with examples of its abuse. So I see no inconsistency between the observation that the individual is greater than the state and the church's teaching on free will at all. But I'm also not unaware of the church's social policy. And the social policy of the church is that I am my brother's keeper and that I should help my brother out. I accept that and I embrace it, as long as I am free to accept it and embrace it, as long as I am not forced to do it through the mechanism of government.
Judge, as always, thank you so much for your very well-informed commentary. For Reason TV, I am Matt Well.
We had a little bit more time. I just let it go ahead and finish out there. But really, the Pope is not what he seems to be in the traditional Catholic view, and that is why you see a lot of Catholics rejecting all of this politics and social justice type stuff that's coming out of the church. It kind of seems almost as the church is moving backwards. Like the Catholic Church is once again reaching to make the Catholic Church the dominating force by playing along with the rhetoric of climate change, the rhetoric of tolerance. Tolerating someone and being forced to participate in things are two different things, and really the Pope is kind of rewriting his own position as Pope the same way that we see society rewriting definitions of titles and names and meanings of almost everything. And people can go, well, gays have the right to marry. Well, they have the right to have whatever they consider marriage to be. But the problem is you can't redefine the meaning of a word that is derived from religion for something that goes against that same religion. You can't force those people of that religion to go along with that. It's a definition. There's a reason that there's definitions. Words are supposed to mean something. When you start saying, well, at any point in time we can rewrite a definition of a word, it kind of makes contracts a little sketchy anymore, don't it? when we put down in that I would pay you back this plus that percentage, that, we changed the definition of what that meant. So really, I don't owe you anything. Do you think that's going to work out well? It's something where we're seeing definitions and words and everything being changed to manipulate a social order that is being pushed, not only here in America, but around the world. And we have a situation where the West is really becoming a place of nothing more than control. When you can be defined or even be suspect of being the new definition of maybe a terrorist or domestic terrorist, they can indefinitely detain you. Most people would say that's not constitutional. They make up an excuse why it is by redefining the meaning of things. Of course, yeah, I'm a libertarian. But if the Constitution gives the authority for government to exist, or, its legitimacy, if they're willing to go against it, and hence they are voiding their legitimacy. That means we are having a government overthrow, and we've been having a government overthrow. We don't live in that constitutional republic anymore, which only puts more emphasis into libertarian ideas. I've told people a lot, we weren't supposed to have a standing army, only a navy for defense. I wish they would have applied that same ideology to the federal government. But of course, we've been at war after war after war after war. So again, the federal government would have redefined something to make themselves legitimate in their own eyes. We are coming to the end of the broadcast. I've posted a lot of what I've talked about on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Anti-Tyranny News. You can check it out there. Trying to get back in the swing of things. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, also on Twitter. I'm trying to get some things going this winter. Everybody knows I had some projects going. I would like to finish those projects. And also finish the expansion that I've been trying to work on. But thank you all for tuning in. I'll catch you this Friday. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV for all the great broadcasts up after this.